Okay, so we're going to look at the three postulates in Kant's thinking today. There are three of them, but first of all, we need to know what the them is. What is a postulate when it's around? So, a postulate, Kant defines as this. He thinks it is a presupposition. So, a presupposition is something that kind of must be the case in order for you to do a thing. And these are presuppositions of morality. Now, these are presuppositions of morality, but they are post his actual setting out of morality. He writes this in his later book. Remember, his main kind of ethical thinking we've already established in the groundwork of the metaphysics of morals. But a few years later, he writes the critique of practical reason to establish these kind of three rules for kind of what ethics needs to assume in order for you to practice ethics. Now, these three things, they are not something that you actually need to believe. That's quite interesting, isn't it? You don't need to believe it in order for them to be, well, to be true. Instead, they are things that just need to be true in order for you to behave morally. There's my hastily drawn book with the title Critique of Practical Reason, which is where he sets out the three postulates. So, we understand what a postulate is. It's a thing that needs to be true in order for you to kind of behave in a moral system. The question then is, what are the three postulates? Well, here's the answer. The three postulates are freedom, immortality, and God. So freedom is, let me put it in my definition colour, essentially just choice. The ability to have chosen otherwise. What we mean by that is, if we rewound time, could you have done something different? So it's the ability to choose otherwise. Okay. Wow, I ran out of space there. Hopefully you can read that. Immortality, well, that's pretty obvious. That's life after death. He's not claiming that you won't die, but rather that you will kind of have a life post death in this kind of otherness, this afterlife. And finally, God. God being, of course, well, God, the divine being. Now, we're going to kind of talk about why he thinks these are postulates, why he thinks they are presuppositions of morality. We're going to go through them one at a time, but I want to go through them in a very particular order, because Kant does too. A large part of the critique of practical reason is used to establish the existence of free will. And he thinks that this kind of comes before morality. Whereas the others, immortality and God, they are the result of moral behaviour or moral thinking. So we're going to start with freedom. Okay, a lot of things are about to flash up onto your screen. There you go. In order to understand Kant's understanding of freedom, we need to understand his distinction between what he calls the phenomenal world and the noumenal world. Okay, so the phenomenal world is the world of sensations. So it is the world that you see around you. Science. Okay. Now, importantly here, it is also deterministic. So we've got this kind of view of science, a view of the world through our senses. We see this kind of world. It filters into our senses and gives us an impression of it. But it's also very much, it also behaves according to regularity. There isn't much change going on there. So what we mean by deterministic is it follows a set pattern. There is cause and effect, hence my drawing of atoms. Okay, so the phenomenal world, the phenomena, the senses world, the world of science is a deterministic world. And Kant has a big problem with this. Well, if I want to believe in free will, where do I put it? This is why he believes in the noumenal world, which is kind of the world almost of reason. It is the spirit world. We don't have direct access to this, but it's where our will is. And in this world, we are capable of free choice. And that is where our freedom comes from. Now, it's a weird thing to believe in the noumenal world, right? Why not just believe only in the phenomenal, in the deterministic world of the senses? Why believe in this spiritual kind of free will area of rationality? Why? Well, the answer is this. In order to be moral, and by moral here I mean morally accountable. So in order to be judged for your actions, you need to be capable of being responsible for your actions. You need to choose them. Why is that? Well, consider this as an example. If for instance, your computer or phone or whatever you're using right now to watch this tutorial were to blow up in your face and hurt you, you might be angry at the circumstance, but you can't be rationally angry at the computer or the phone because it's not the computer or phone's fault, right? It's not that it chose to do it. It isn't responsible in itself. But if someone else kind of put a bomb in there and then it blew up, you could be pretty angry at the person who did that because they had choice. So the ability to do it or not to have done it gives you moral responsibility. As Kant himself says, it is the condition of the moral law. So without freedom, you can't be morally responsible. And Kant says, I know, a priori, is a little bit earlier in this quote, I know through reason that morality exists. So this thing then, this freedom is a kind of prerequisite of morality. It is required in order for you to have moral, in order for you to have moral responsibility, in order for morality to exist as a thing. Okay. But now we know that morality exists and is backed up by the first postulate, freedom. there are some interesting implications about what your obligations are. Remember, Kant has three categorical imperatives. We're particularly interested in the kingdom of ends at this point, in order for him to show that immortality and God exist. He says, look, we are obligated. I'm going to put this in this colour because it's kind of an argument here that we're looking at now. We are obligated to bring about the kingdom of ends. So the kingdom of ends, remember, is in the third categorical imperative, essentially a hypothetical idea. It's not real, but you want it to be. It is, another way of defining it, the summum bonum, which is everybody doing good things, so they're good actions, which you understand because they are the ones that are universalizable, and as a result, meeting their ends, gaining their ends. In other words, getting the things they want, being happy. Kant thinks that's the end of morality. That's the purpose of it, for everyone to perform good actions and be happy. And you, because it is the purpose of morality, are obligated to achieve that. That is where morality leads to. Okay? So that's the purpose of morality. But we do have a problem here. And the problem is that whilst morality obliges you to try to bring about the kingdom of ends, and you as a moral being ought to try and do that, you are not actually capable of it. You can't do it. You can't bring about the kingdom of ends. But, says Kant, and I skipped over this just before because I want to talk about it now, ought implies can. What this means is, if you are obligated, so if you are obligated to achieve something, then you must be capable of it. So, for instance, you might be obligated if you have money to give to charity, right? You might be obligated if you are able to recycle. But you're not obligated to save the world. You're not obligated to stop climate change because you on your own cannot do that. Because you can't be obligated to do it. But if you are obligated to do something, then there must be a way for you to do it. But now we have a problem, right? Because you are obligated, according to the principles of morality that Kant set out, to bring about the kingdom of ends. So you must be able to do it. And yet you can't do it. You can't bring it about. So what's missing? Well, you can't do it because the world is so corrupt. Okay? So there must be an afterlife in which these things are possible. But an afterlife doesn't just spring up out of nowhere. Oh no, that's not reasonable. Instead, there must be a God who brings about that afterlife. So there must be a God who makes it possible. And that is how we get to the conclusion that there must be immortality in God, the second and third postulates.